Good morning to those of you who are in the media who have come today. It is a privilege to be here standing with this cadre of Louisiana citizens. I'm fortunate today. My name is Theron Jackson. I am the pastor of the Morning Star Baptist Church in Shreveport, Louisiana, and work with Together Louisiana. So glad to have with us today Dr. S.C. Dixon, who is the president of Louisiana Home and Foreign Mission Baptist Convention, and also to have with us Ms. Diane Hanley, Reverend Larry Foy, and as I said, a cadre of other leaders from around the state of Louisiana. We're privileged to be here. We are here together. However, I will say it's an unfortunate gathering in the sense that today we talk about the fact and have come to highlight the fact that it appears that we live in a state where there is a double standard for legislative process. That our legislative process, rather than highest and best use of limited resources, rather than making the decisions that will affect Louisiana the best, very often it appears that the legislative process is one of creating winners and losers, picking winners and losers. And far too often, the winners are wealthy, corporate, and the losers are citizens in Louisiana. Families in Louisiana appear to be losing. Poor people in Louisiana appear to be losing. And people who find themselves asset limited, income constrained, and go to work every day find themselves still losing even after this session. So today, we have come to just illustrate and highlight what we think to be some of these double standards. We can't afford to have two Louisianas any more than we can afford to have two legislative processes. So today I want to give you a few examples. I'll call others who will come to give some illustrations of the kind of double standards we speak to when we talk about what's happening in our house here in the state of Louisiana. So I'd like to introduce first Ms. Diane Hanley, and following Diane, Reverend Larry Foy will come.
As he said, I'm Diane Hanley with Together Baton Rouge and Together Louisiana. I have brought an illustration. I went to the Mississippi River, you can do that here, and I got this bucket of water this morning. This came out of the tap right inside. This is what we drink. This is where we're heading. The clock is ticking, and it has to do with SB 203. You're going to hear about bills that didn't make it through the process and about who those bills will impact. In stark contrast, SB 203 is a bill that would negatively impact the drinking water of all of us, and it sailed through the legislative process. Essentially, it exempts key members of the Groundwater Conservation Commission from provisions of the Code of Governmental Ethics. Ethics charges are currently pending, and so legislation was created to retroactively nullify those charges. Where did a bill like this come from? Well, in the 70s, the legislation was passed to create the Groundwater Commission to protect our drinking water. However, since then, the Commission has not stopped or even slowed the saltwater intrusion into our groundwater drinking sources, or the industrial overpumping that is causing the salt contamination. Why? There are commissioners who are serving on the Commission who are employees of the very industry whose groundwater pumping is being regulated. There is a clear public-private conflict of interest if employees sit on the state board that regulates their employers. So, because of excessive drilling and use of the groundwater, the aquifer used for drinking water in this Baton Rouge area is threatened by saltwater intrusion. There are reports, too, that the Baton Rouge Water Company has already bought land near the Mississippi River. So, if it goes unchallenged, Baton Rouge and surrounding parishes will be forced to switch to a source of drinking water from the Mississippi. This doesn't have to happen. There are efforts underway to move the Commission in a more positive direction, but SB 203 would undo that positive work. SB 203 exonerates of conflict of interest charges those serving on the Groundwater Commission in the Baton Rouge region. Essentially, ethics charges are being negotiated by legislation, and SB 203 would codify that action. So we are asking the governor to veto SB 203 to save our drinking water. I'll be back.
Good morning. I'm the Reverend Larry W. Foy, the newly appointed Executive Director of Together for Hope, Louisiana. After being away from my home state for 45 years, I've returned here to try to help make a difference. Out of those 45 years while I was away from the state of Louisiana, yet I was always present because I have a brother who's been incarcerated in Angola for 40 years, serving a life without possibility of parole. During those 40 years, we have lost both of our parents, most recently losing our mother last year to COVID. The sad part about it is that my brother, Russell, did not get a chance to say goodbye to either of our parents. I'm here without the presence of his wife, who would have joined me, but she has gone through 3 surgeries and is now receiving treatment for cancer. Russell will die in prison and be buried in prison if, in fact, we do not do something about giving people an opportunity to redeem themselves. We are supposed to be a nation of redemption and a nation of second chances. And yet, when Representative Duplessis put forth a bill, HB 490, he could not muster up enough votes to even get it in a committee. To me, this is shameful. It shows a lack of humanity toward other people, and that's not who we are, and it shouldn't be who we are. I often think about what would have happened to those of us people of faith, and perhaps to you, if Moses, who committed a violent act against a person, and for 40 years was on the run, but then he got redemption and then went back and liberated a people. And then he gives us the law, the great lawgiver. I often think about what would have happened if David, the greatest king of Israel, who plotted to take another man's life, and yet it's David who gives us the most powerful prayer and the most powerful piece of poetry that we know in sacred scripture, the 23rd Psalm. And for those of us who are specifically Christian, I often think about what would we be like if Paul, who conspired to kill hundreds and perhaps thousands of people simply because they believed in a person who had risen from the dead. They all got second chances. Everybody has worth and value. Representative Duplessis was simply trying to give value and worth to people whom we have written off as not being redeemable. I don't think that is the case. I hope that we will move forward and that our representatives will become more humane in their treatment of people who have been written off. Thank you.
Thank you to Reverend Foy, and I want to reiterate something in case you missed it. Diane Hanley said that legislation had been passed. We're asking the governor to veto Senate Bill 203. Senate Bill 203 again says it's okay to have a conflict of interest, and it's okay to be retroactive in the forgiveness of what may be seen as a conflict of interest, retroactively. I wanted to talk to you about another bill. Remember the spirit of that Senate Bill 203, because there was another bill, and we're pleased to have with us Representative Randall Gaines, who is here, who authored a bill that would have taken what the citizens of the state of Louisiana have said. Some of you will remember we voted, was it a year or so ago, that we had an arcane practice going on in our state where you could be convicted in Louisiana without a unanimous jury. But we as citizens said we don't want to live in that kind of state. And when they put it out to amend the Constitution in a referendum, we voted overwhelmingly as a state that we didn't want people to have that kind of injustice any longer. Well, Representative Gaines thought it was fair and just, and I agree with him, that there are 1,500 people in Louisiana who are still suffering because they were convicted by a non-unanimous jury. He felt like, and I think maybe if you misread it, you might think he said, let 1,500 people go. But that's not what he said. His bill said maybe they ought to have the right to petition for another trial. Yet, the committee that he chairs, which I also thought Representative Gaines was a strange thing from my time around this legislature, that the committee that he chairs failed to bring it out of committee. That doesn't typically happen in this House. That doesn't typically happen. I will say to you, you be the judge and the jury, but I want to invite Representative Gaines to come to talk a little bit about what I think is this his bill. And then I think you can see, if you see like I do, the juxtaposition between what Diane has said and how the folks who sit on that commission get retroactive justice versus what Randall Gaines is trying to do. Representative Gaines.
Thank you, Reverend. So, who so eloquently and comprehensively set forth the issues that was trying to resolve with my bill. We as legislators, particularly the legislators that I align myself with, are dedicated to giving an opportunity for the underserved, giving opportunities, giving chances to those who, for some circumstances, may not have gotten their first chance, let alone a second chance. But for us, they may not have any chance. So we're here to be a voice for those, the voice for the voiceless, and to fight for those whose ability to fight has been restricted due to lack of resources or lack of opportunity. That's why we're here. That's why I ran for office. And this particular bill that was just being discussed, HB 346, was to take a little further the cause of justice that was created when we passed the unanimous jury verdict law 2 years ago. I was chair of the Black Caucus at the time, and we actually led the charge to get that bill passed. We won 61 out of 64 parishes because the state said that, the legislature said that it was unfair because the law was created, the law had a racist origin and a racist intent dating back over 100 years because it was designed to incarcerate more black people, which resulted in the Louisiana having the highest incarceration rate in the nation, with 60 to 70% of those being black. So the legislature said this is unfair. The law was created with a discriminatory intent. It had a discriminatory impact, and it was effective because it worked. Well, we changed that. We said this is wrong. The 61 out of 64 parishes, the voters in 61 out of 64 parishes, this was wrong. We do not want this to stain Louisiana's heritage. Let's remove this. But it was only going forward to those who would be convicted after the law was passed in October of 2018. It was only to apply to those who went to trial after that. Well, what about those who were convicted under the law prior to the law being passed? If you're going to administer justice, it has to be administered equally, fairly, and uniformly. Other than that, that's not justice. If justice is denied to anyone, it denies justice for everyone. So we passed this law in 2018, saying it was wrong. My bill was designed to apply to those who may have been unfortunate enough to have been convicted prior to the law. And every day when we come to this legislature, we say a pledge of allegiance that ends in justice for all. It doesn't say justice for some. It doesn't say justice if you're lucky to go to trial at the right time. It doesn't say justice if you're fortunate enough to have been a timely, your trial has been timely. It says justice for all, and that's what we were trying to do. But the bill it failed in committee 7-5, unfortunately. But what I've done with the bill, I've created a task force. And the task force is going to have the same intent of the bill. And the task force is comprised of prosecutors, defense attorneys, legislators, activists, and this task force is going to come together and identify those cases that may have been resulted in a miscarriage of justice to those who were convicted prior to the law being passed. And this task force is going to come together and work to make sure that those individuals who may have been convicted under unfortunate circumstances, may have been convicted due to a non-unanimous jury verdict where a miscarriage of justice may have resulted from that, The task force is going to identify those cases and recommend to the district attorney's office, the district attorney association, to retry those cases, which they're already doing, but we want to make sure that we participate in that process. And we're going to recommend that these cases need to be looked at, either given opportunity for clemency, given opportunity for parole, or given opportunity for a retrial. So the intent of the law, the intent of my bill, even though the bill didn't pass, the intent of the bill is still going to go forward, and we're going to create opportunities, because right now the justice that they have gotten is not real justice, it's the imitation of justice. And Mandela said, you don't judge a nation by how it treats its highest citizens, but how it treats its lowest citizens. And we're going to make sure that the intent of this legislature is we're going to overcome any barriers that we face in making sure that all these gentlemen and all those people who've been convicted under the non-unanimous jury law are afforded justice. And we're not going to be deterred, and we're not going to be discouraged, and we're going to make sure that this is carried out. Thank you.
So I just want to share a story with you that illustrates the problem with SB 203. I found out that there were 3 positions opened on the Groundwater Commission, the Capital Area Groundwater Commission. That's the one that serves the Baton Rouge area. So I called a friend of mine who's talked to me about water. It's been important to him, drinking water. He also happens to be an ex-executive, a retired executive of one of the industries that's being regulated, that's doing a lot of the drilling work. So I said, you have a good perspective. You're retired and you understand the business, and water matters to you. Why don't you think about being on this commission? So he did like he does. He did great research for a whole week, learned all about the commission, and said, there is no way I can be on this commission. Let me share with you what he told me. He shared that while this commission is dedicated to the conservation and protection of groundwater, which is important to him, its mission includes regulatory and permitting authority over these groundwater resources. As a retired executive of one of the industries that is being regulated, he believes a position with a regulatory and permitting commission would definitely put him in a conflict of interest with his previous employer. So he declined. That would be what a man of integrity would do, a person of integrity would do. In a conversation with the governor that we had, Together Louisiana and Together Baton Rouge, the governor shared with us that he thought the legislators will be loath to support a bill that exempts anyone from the ethics code and that changes the ethics code for some. Well, Governor, they passed it. And we hope, Governor, that you will veto it. We are asking you to veto this because it would exonerate people who are violated the code, and it would put into law the ability to continue to be on the commission even if one has a conflict of interest. It would codify it. So I want to finish with one more story. I've been talking to people about this water issue, and I found out about a woman who worked in the Phoenix Water Department. Phoenix. She worked there for over 30 years. When she started, 70% of their drinking water came from groundwater. When she retired, 1% of their drinking water came from groundwater. That's where we're heading. SB 203 continues the trend in Louisiana to go in that direction. The Groundwater Commission will be in a better position to regulate the use of groundwater if SB 203 is vetoed by the governor, and that's why we're asking him to veto it. Thank you.
Finally, again, thank you to each of those who have come to share the stories, for those who've come to take this stand, to stand with us today. I want to just say that we are concerned about 2 processes, 2 legislative processes, where when we finish this today, we think about who's been impacted. People who drink water in Baton Rouge, potentially, in this session. People who are victims of non-unanimous juries, perhaps in this session. The only people who seem to have benefited were the people who have access to be able to get laws created on their behalf in this session. I would say to Governor Edwards, veto this bill, stop the double standard, help us to raise the ethical standards for everybody. Let's think about protecting everybody's water and protecting everybody's rights. Ladies and gentlemen, the folks you see standing back here are people who are committed to incarcerated people. They're committed They have prison ministries at their churches and their organizations and their different affiliations. They're committed to people who are incarcerated. We feel like all of Louisiana's citizens matter. We want to certainly say again, Senate Bill 203, we hope that the governor will veto, but nonetheless, we hope that the public will pay attention to this dangerous juxtaposition where some people get a chance for retroactive justice and other folks are denied in the same session, in the same house, in the same state. Something's wrong. I shared with one of the reporters I talked to today, I hardly ever quote Marlo Thomas, but I quote Marlo Thomas, and she simply said, nothing changes if nothing changes. Thank you.
Governor, veto SB 203.
Are there any questions, anybody, that anybody might entertain before we break out?
Thank you so much.
Anybody else from the media?
So,
Yes.
explain a little bit about, because this is kind of a complex idea for people who don't know about it. So, for people who don't really know much about the commission and the code of ethics, in simple terms, how do you describe this bill and what it's trying to do?
So, you want to talk about that?
SB 203.
Okay. I just wanted to shake this up a little bit because it's really muddy on the bottom. There we go, a little darker there. The bill is 1.5 pages long. It's really quick read, and it just rewrites that certain people will be exempt from the code of ethics when it concerns their conflict of interest on this commission. It's a very short bill, and that's what it does. And it's retroactive to anybody who has been in the past, so we can't go after them. And it affects the future, so that in the future, people can have a conflict of interest and they won't be charged through the code of ethics.
And what is the commission, what is it for? What are its functions?
Thank you. So the commission was set up in the 70s to protect our groundwater sources. That's what they were set up to do. And but unfortunately, drilling has continued because on the commission are these people that are a part of the industry that's being regulated. So that's their charge, their mission, is to regulate and give permits for the drilling and pumping of our groundwater. So what is happening in Baton Rouge is that there are industries that are going deep into the aqueduct, into the aquifer, and drilling that water out, which means salt water is being drawn in. And so instead of using the Mississippi River for their industrial use, they're using our groundwater, which drains it from us being able to use it for household means if it gets filled with salt water. Does that help?
Could I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Hi, and also this commission was set up, as Ms. Handley said, to monitor and to control the consumption and use of the groundwater from the aquifer. But until recently, there were no meters. There were no meters on any of the wells. And there's a legislative auditor's report that says this commission is unaware of over 1,100 wells that exist in the Baton Rouge area. So how can you actually monitor and control if you don't know? We were successful in getting funds to put meters because up to now, industry was on the honor system. They would report how much they draw from the aquifer. And this commission has set limits that industry can draw, but the honor system isn't working because the executive directive of the commission says if the usage of what industry reported was correct, we would not have a problem with saltwater intrusion. So I think the meters will help solve the problem. We have meters on our homes. Why we can't have meters on the aquifer for industry?
Edgar Cage. Edgar Cage. Hey, listen, we have other members of the Black. I want to say this while we're, and I think, pardon the pun, but I think it's okay to drill down into that issue. But I want to be clear that while we talk about what did happen, I also don't want us to lose fact of what did not happen. And House Bill 346 did not happen. You heard Representative Gaines talk about that just a moment ago, and that juxtaposition does not need to be lost. It's one thing to go and explain about the aquifer and the commission, and that is a legit issue. That's a legit issue. It becomes more legitimate to us when we juxtapose that to the fact that there are people in the state of Louisiana who don't get the same kind of consideration, who happen to be incarcerated right now, at least 1,500 of those people. So don't want that to be lost in this as well. I saw Representative Ted James, who's the president of the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus, who's here. I'm not sure if he wants to. Is it? Ted, would you like to? Okay. Get me off my soapbox.
Get you on your soapbox. Good morning, Ted James here, Louisiana State Rep District 101 in Baton Rouge. Also serve as the chair of the Louisiana Legislative Black Caucus, and I'm joined with Representative Tammy Phelps from Shreveport. As you all know, we're in the final hours of this 2021 legislative session, so it's important that we are on the floor, as there are some procedural moves that are attempting to be made to bring up some very bad bills. So we are manning the floor, but we just want to show our support. If you look at the votes on the House side, the vast majority of our caucus didn't support this legislation. And we know, we've been around here a very long time, we know that while Lady Justice is colorblind, the folks that serve with us behind, they see very clear. And justice looks very different depending on the person that's seeking justice. And we know that, and we've been fighting for a lot of these issues. And one of the, with the groundwater conservation issue and the ethics issue, you know, I'm happy that Together Louisiana has highlighted this issue, because a lot of times those things go untalked about. And it is a very bad precedent for the legislature to come in and undo what ethics has told us that we should not be doing. And I know that there was some conflicting testimony, but the caucus, we are standing here with you all. We recognize that this is an enormous partnership, but even in the face of a lot of opposition, through working with many of you, especially on issues with criminal justice reform and voting rights, we have been successful on some issues. So I don't want it to be said that the caucus and you advocates on some of the issues that you guys have fought for, that we haven't been successful in this session. And I look forward to continuing that success, and I know that I will be personally asking the governor to veto this legislation. So that's coming from me. So appreciate you guys.
Good morning, and thank you all for being here. I will be very, very brief. I would like to say to Together Louisiana and all the advocates behind us, I would not be here if you all were not there. And I thank you all so much, because no one has to take out their time to fight for others the way that you do and represent. I always feel needed and justified and strength given when I see any of you in the audience and in the committees, and emailing and calling on us just to serve others, as we know God has called on us to help as much as we can. So again, thank you. We do stand with you, and again, if it were not for you, we would not be able to do what we do, and I appreciate you so much. Thank you.
All right. If there are no other questions, any other questions? Yes, sir.
I wanted to ask Representative James, which bills are you particularly concerned about? You mentioned some bad bills. Which are the main ones?
So there's one with Senator Mizell that deals with that will take us back to pre-criminal justice reform. There's a one that we stopped that one on yesterday. There's a bill that will that is being told that, oh, we're going to increase minority representation on the Supreme Court. Anytime that Jeff Landry is for a bill that has to do with voting, I'm against it. I think that the legislation is trying to take us away from decided precedent. Judges are not elected one man, one vote. And if we set something different for the Supreme Court, and I know some of the folks that are for it are saying, oh, we're going to give you a new African-American on this court. It's going to be Baton Rouge based. I'm from Baton Rouge. I'm not willing to sacrifice years of precedent for one Supreme Court seat just because I'm a black person from Baton Rouge. I'll tell you that getting away from Supreme Court precedent with one man, one vote for not being the standard for judges. We have more African American judges per capita than any other state in the country, and that's because folks like Judge Janice Clark fought extremely hard. So I'm not going to sit idly by, and we as a caucus are not going to sit idly by and let Jeff Landry take that away. That was one that we were able to kill that on yesterday, but of course they're trying to use procedure to bring it back. At this late hour, any bill requires 2/3 to be heard. So that's why many of us are still inside to make sure that we are not going to let some of those things happen. Conference committee reports, a lot can be done in the conference committee report, so that we have folks that are in there just reading and making sure. I know that the bill that we voted on that was a tax on marijuana looks totally different now that it's in the Senate, and there are extreme concerns about what that will do to the budget and some vital services that we fought too hard to protect. So, we're just monitoring some of those things to make sure that we don't pass anything to the governor that we don't think will align with the mission that these good folks behind me have been working so hard to protect.